Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Thumbs up. Welcome back from a busy, busy day on Capitol Hill. Ooh. And from a wonderful and fantastic meal. Huge shout out to Ernest and the Hilton staff for taking such fantastic care of us as we're in this space together. So we've been doing some really important work today. Who here in the room did a lobby visit today? Show us some hands and maybe give a cheer. Okay. Fantastic. And for our folks on Zoom, why don't you give us a wave if you did a virtual action or participated in an online workshop? That's great. We still have the numbers rolling in, so please fill out your lobby visit reports if you haven't already. But at the moment, we've had 70 plus lobby visits occur today and 50 plus calls to Capitol Hill on Peacebuilding coming in from across the country. So we've taken some powerful and timely action together. Moving into the rest of our evening tonight, it's my great honor to introduce our next panel. The Future of Pacebuilding and Local Power, or Local Power in the Future of Pacebuilding, rather. Our esteemed guests will be sharing with us more about their peacebuilding work, as well as guiding us through some thoughts about these important questions. What is the future of peacebuilding? And how can we build better and more effective partnerships as we continue the important work of decolonizing aid? So to facilitate and introduce our guests, please join me in welcoming back to the stage our General Secretary of FCNL, Bridget Moix.
I told y'all to stop the clapping.
Recording in progress.
Oh, excellent. That's good to know. Welcome back, everyone. It's so good to be here with all of you and to have this wonderful opportunity with our panel. I'm going to ask Vahe, Quscondy, and Bina to come on up to the stage here while we get started. So as many of you know, I have been honored to learn about and work around peace-building issues for a long time. And I think I have two primary sources of everything I've learned. If I've learned anything about peace-building, I've learned it from two sources. The first is Quakerism, and many people here in this room and in the Zoom and beyond who have taught me about the core of our peace testimony as friends, of the dignity and divine spark that is in each person that grounds that testimony and our work in the world, and that building peace is not only possible, we are doing it all the time. And the second source for me has been the incredible honor to work alongside and learn from local peace builders from around the world, including some of the folks here on the stage, particularly through Peace Direct, which many of them are connected to, and to be able to accompany them at times in engaging with policy here in the US and doing the work that FCNL does in collaboration and accompaniment with people who are living the realities of conflict and choosing peace in the midst of that. And we've been hearing stories and had other speakers over the last day really deepening our understanding and recognition of the power that lives in those stories and realities to advance the world we seek, and the power of connecting our stories with their stories. So I'm really happy to be able to introduce our speakers. And once again, I'm going to point you to the program for their longer bios. They all have done incredible work, and you can read more about it there. But I want to say a personal connection for each of them for me in introducing them. So first, Binalakshmi Nepram who is founder of the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network. Born in Manipur, India, is an indigenous scholar, published author, and women's rights activist. She does incredible work on disarmament, women-led peacebuilding, indigenous peacebuilding, so many issues that we care about. And Bina and I first shared a stage some years ago at a large conference of the Alliance for Peacebuilding. And I will always remember her words in speaking to the experience of being a peace builder in the midst of war and violence, when she said, you know, for us, peace building is not a program. It is our actual survival. It is the question of life or death for us and our communities. And that has always stayed with me and been an important reminder. So, Bina, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Vahe Mirikian is acting managing director of Peace Direct's U.S. office. And he leads not only the U.S. advocacy, but also advocacy with the UN for Peace Direct. And in that role, engages with local peacebuilding partners around the world and brings them into the halls of power to lift up their voices and stories. And Vahe and I met when we were collaborating on a project for a Yemen peace art exhibit. And it was an exhibit of these incredibly beautiful paintings from children in Yemen sharing their world, the challenges of their world in war and their hopes for peace in Yemen, and photographs. And we were making an exhibit in the halls of Congress. And Vahe can navigate Congress like no one I've seen, to the point that he managed to figure out how could you actually get this enormous exhibit with a lot of metal and various parts through congressional security. And there was a van ride involved to a very distant security place we had to go through. And so Vahe is an incredible advocate, and we can learn a great deal from him. And finally, Quscondy Abdulshafi is Senior Regional Advisor for Africa at Freedom House, and also a board member of U.S. Peace Direct's board. He is an incredible activist, human rights defender, experienced peace builder, beginning his experience as a student activist in Khartoum around the genocide in Darfur, and continues to do incredible work with communities there and here in advocacy. And Quscondy and I first met because when I was at Peace Direct, we advertised for a summer intern. We needed help. We were a small organization. And I got this resume from someone with so much depth of experience and knowledge, plus 2 master's degrees, that I had to call him up and say, I'm thrilled that you sent your resume, but could you please teach us and work with us in a larger capacity? And so he is now on the board of Peace Direct and doing incredible work. So Quscondy, we're really happy you're here. I'm going to sit down and we're going to engage in a conversation for a little while about peace building. What's the future? How do we improve as peace builders, and how do we partner better? And then we're going to have time for questions and discussion as well. And I'm going to make sure that we get questions from the Zoom as well. So please do put those in the chat as we go. And I think we have a way to look at those. So we'll get back to that in the Q&A. Hi. Great. So the danger of this conversation is that we could just spend hours talking, catching up, and also listening and learning to your stories and experiences. And so we're going to start with questions and have kind of a free flow of conversation, I hope. And I just wanted to start by asking you all, from your own experience, how do you see the future of peace building? And maybe there's a story or an example you could share from your own work and experience that can help us think about the future of what we want peacebuilding to be. So, Quscondy, do you want to start? And we'll just go down.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate everyone here. Okay, can you hear me now well? Okay, I really appreciate this evening, and thank you, FCNL, for the invitation for this event. And I'm always, flattered to see, our peace builders across the U.S. I saw you a year ago in a virtual meeting, and some of you are here today. I am really happy to be here with you. Just to dive into Bridget's question, what is the future of peace building? I just gave you a big picture of, what is global world telling us in the past 2 years. I work for Freedom House. We do a research on freedom in the world, which assesses the governance. This is 17 years that freedom in the world just go down, decline every year. But for the war and peace, in the past just 1 year, we watched the horrific war in Ukraine. We watched the restart of the violence in several countries in Africa. In just past few months, 3 months, 6 months, we watched the restart of violence in Congo. The Congo has the world's oldest civil war, but this is the record displacement of around 7 million. That didn't happen in the past 40 years of civil war in Congo. Sudan, my home country, the conflict started in April, and now the whole entire system of the state is collapsed. We have millions, almost 80% of the population of the country are displaced. The 2003 genocide in Darfur now restarted, this time without actually existing state structures to respond in any way as possible. We had the largest U.S. mission just five years ago, largest UN mission in the world. Now none of them exist, and all of those people are left on the hands of their perpetrator doing whatever they want to do. In the recent months, we see the war broke down in Armenia-Azerbaijan border. We also see increasing violence in, different countries, Turkey, Greek shelling, different messages that's telling us that, world is not going well. We hear Gaza-Israel war. So this is the big picture that the conflict has moved from not only from the local internal conflict between civil wars, but also intra-state conflicts that are looking very serious in the coming next future. I think for me, I would say also our peace building will need to transform itself. Because if we have spent all of this money throughout those years in all this industry, development, peace building, and these are the results we are getting, I think because there is lack of accountability. And because always that conversation within our field is one way. Donors have money, they come you bring the project, they tell you what to do, this is the objective, this is the outcome, do it, give it us, we see, goodbye, we are going to tell this story somewhere there in the closet office. And there is no accountability from the local people. Is this what we want, or is this really delivers? And in that conversation, we don't know actually whose voice is being counted. And I think for me, the future of peace building need a structural reform. We have to reframe the narrative around all our enterprise. And that means we have to do a transformation in our relationship from client relationship, which are very transactional, to more constructive, genuine partnership for deeper change. We also need to acknowledge and understand that we have to change the motives, the morale in our industry, mostly in the peace building and development. And mostly acknowledge that you can sign a paper and give someone $10,000, but you can not respond to the email. That's a lot of power. You have to acknowledge that you have the power. And the other person who is in the receiving end doesn't have. If you don't acknowledge that, you will abuse intentionally or not intentionally, you will abuse. And that's why our work moves in an empty circle. The second, I think one thing that is, we always work to respond. Everyone, you can imagine how just 1 hour of war in any country cost to repair. Souls missed, people displaced. That 1 hour was just of the war cost millions and billions of dollars. But we are happy to respond to violence or to react on what's happened. But we are very, very less effective into building local structures that can prevent before the conflict happens. And I think we need to shift our mission to more into, preventive than, trying to respond, because you respond here, start somewhere there, and all the response measures are temporary. Somebody is hungry, need a medicine, and it is not strategic, and it doesn't help the local, it doesn't help you, and it doesn't help the world peace. And I think we need to restructure our mission in the field and how do we engage. And within that conversation, building local peace building, local systems, building a strategic and structural relationship, providing sustainable funding and engagement for local systems, conflict resolution, intervention building are very much useful, more than just doing, multi-million dollars aid every year. So those are my just general headlines, and I'm going to hand over back to you, Bridget, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Quscondy. And we'll just pass it to Vahe and then Bina to engage.
Yes. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for inviting and organizing this amazing event, and for all of you for attending as well. As a little bit, just to start and piggyback off of everything Quscondy was saying as well, just a bit background on Peace Direct in itself. We are an international peacebuilding organization that is not the stereotypical INGO. We do not have any country offices anywhere around the world. We work directly with local civil society, including in Sudan and in other conflict countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Colombia, and Myanmar, for example. And our work is to really work through and with and follow the local peacebuilding leaders that we work with in what they need and supporting them and accompanying them to build peace wherever they're operating in, while also working to shift power and resources within the international community, philanthropy, multilaterals, and governments to change policies to get resources directly to local peace builders, which what Quscondy was saying as far as transforming the partnerships, as well as working and transforming the system at large to work with peace building organizations. And with that, we've been working through our local action fund to, work with local peacebuilding organizations to get small grants of $5,000 to $15,000 to smaller civil society organizations, peacebuilding organizations in various different countries that would otherwise be disqualified or under the radar of traditional donors. This is really unlocking and tapping into a resource of peacebuilding organizations around the world to mobilize and address a lot of the violence that we are witnessing and that we're hearing about, which is a bit of what Quscondy was saying as far as transforming and reimagining how we're doing these things. And that's what Peace Direct's role has been in trying to really reimagine, but also try to do by example and pilot a lot of these things so we can work with policymakers to say, hey, it's possible, look, we're doing it. And that's part of what the other aspect of what we do is in engaging, as Bridget was mentioning, in my role here with the US government as well as working with the UN, but we also have an office in London and advocacy presence with the EU is really working with the governments, multilaterals and bilateral governments like the United States, as well as with philanthropic institutions and INGOs themselves to really transform how we're doing this work, because that is really the future of like what we're doing. And we're seeing a lot of progress within that as far as the rhetoric and just acceptance of this new mode of doing. And we've gone from the, does this really work? Should we invest into this? To, okay, how do we do this? And in, I would say about 2020, we launched our work into Time to Decolonize Aid. It was an amazing report that really looked at how we recognize the power that local peace-building organizations in the Global South or the majority world already have, and why we are not tapping into that already, and recognizing the expertise that lies around the world that is not having to be here in Washington, D.C. or in New York or Paris or London or elsewhere in the global north, but is already living in the communities amongst themselves. And then also looking at just like the biases of why do we not trust local civil society organizations in the Global South? Why are we having to go through US-based organizations, for example? Why do we have to go through international organizations? So we really looked into that and interrogated that and discussed the experiences that local peacebuilding leaders had from around the world in this conversation. And that, fast forward to today, we recently published our Transforming Partnerships report, because this really looks at how we can transform partnerships, of how international organizations and international communities can partner with local civil society organizations around the world. And this came out from just a lot of the philosophical conversations we're having about the Time to Decolonize Aid report and the Race, Power, and Peacebuilding report of looking at the expertise and partnerships was the how do we do this? So the Transforming Partnership report really looks at the how. How do we actually partner equitably, build trust, and work through the leadership of the local peacebuilding leaders rather than coming in and trying to supplant and give an idea into what is happening or what we're hearing about. But yeah, I will pause there for right now. Thank you.
Thanks.
First of all, I would like to recognize the traditional homeland of the Piscataway and Anacostia people, in which Washington, D.C. has been home. I also acknowledge the elders past who came before us and whose wisdom. And I would also like to greet every one of you in my indigenous language, Manipuri. Mayambu Taramna Okchari. I pay my obeisance to each and every one here in this room and also in the Zoom. And I introduce myself in my local language. Aigi Ming Binalakshmi Kawi, I Manipur Dagini. My name is Binalakshmi Nepram, and I come from the state of Manipur in northeast of India. This is a beautiful state which is at the border of India and Burma, a place which has seen more than 77 years of armed insurgency. I know that you just had your dinner. So after dinner, you would like to rest. I know that. So I thank you for your stamina to sit up and to be able to listen after a whole day of meeting congressmen and women and all the work that you have done coming from so far away from your homes to be in this city. So thank you for your attention, and I promise you not to bore you, to ensure that your evening is a little alive. Bridget quoted me half right and half wrong. What I said is this. I said, peace building is not a project. It is a commitment of a lifetime. It's not a project for us. It's a commitment of a lifetime, where sometimes I feel this lifetime is not even enough. For me, I first encountered the Quakers in New Delhi. They came to see me. They were in their 70s, but they came from London and they came from Canada to meet me. I was only like 27 years old at that time. And I wondered why they came to my area. What they were doing was this. They heard that my region, Manipur, was in a state of conflict. And they wanted to make two warring ethnic groups make peace with one another. And how they were doing it? By making them play football with each other. For me, that was an extraordinary moment for me. I'd never met a Quaker before that. But I realized these people could be enjoying their retired lives. But they came on a flight, and they came out to ensure that two warring groups in northeast of India were able to find their peace. For me, that was a moment when I understood the power of Quakers, I would say. And later, I met many others, and I also has been an extraordinary journey too. But I'm also thankful, again, to the question that Bridget has posed. What is the future of peace building? And actually, as my panelists were speaking, I actually wrote a poem. It's not a poem, but sounds like a poem. And I'm going to share it with you. Because currently we are living at a time of war. Bridget and I talked about the fog of war. And peace building is the stubbornness to look right through the fog and say, that's not real. That war is not the reality of life, but peace is, love is, togetherness is. That for me is the future. It's not just the future, the present of peace building too. I was also thinking, what is the future of peace building? The future of peace building is when nations stop warring with each other, but will they stop it? No. Many of you have done real politics will say nations thrive on conflict. They will create war because that's how they will sell the weapons. That's how they will do the politics. Economies are built not on peace. Economies are built on war. And I know that many of you in this room may have been experienced and really people have been working, but again, in my limited understanding, the future of peace building is when colonization stops in every sense. Future of peace building is when one is able to practice one's faith. Future of peace building is when love begins and not hate speech are promoted. The future of peace building is when disarmament becomes a way of life and not some issue put in the first committee of the United Nations or being put in Geneva in the Committee on Disarmament or the negotiations of disarmament, which is described as a bus which never stops. Nothing happens in Geneva. Nothing, but we keep going there. This is precisely the stubbornness. We have to keep going there till it cracks open, that light. The future of peace building is when racism, xenophobia is extinguished. That no color, no region, no gender differentiates us. The future of peace building is when our leaders start investing in peace and not in war. The future in peace building is when you do not have to lobby the Congress to invest more in peace than war. And the future of peace building is when 112 million people who are currently displaced in refugee camps are able to return to their home. I am one of them. The future is peace building when our children are able to grow up, that our hospitals are not bombed. The future of peace building is when we are able to give the youth their future. And the future of peace building is when each one of us know that we are all connected by one humanity. As the title of your meeting here, justice calls us and love unite us. This is for me the present and the future of peacebuilding. Can you give an example of peacebuilding is what Bridget asked us. So I will end with this. The place that I come from is called Manipur. It's translated as land of jewels. It is next to Burma. What I'm wearing today is called inafi. It's hand-woven by the women of Manipur. It's a place where over 30 ethnic indigenous minorities live, and people of different faith live there. But this beautiful land has been under a martial law since 1958. So if you think India is a land of democracy, I come from India, but there has been a martial law on my land since 1958 till today. We have 100,000 troops of Indian Armed Forces operating there. As a result, a lot of young people picked up arms. There are 72 armed insurgent groups. So imagine growing up. For me, peace was when I was able to take a subway in New York City at about 9 in the night. Because back home, everything stops around 4 o'clock. Because only in the night, military, stray dogs, and insurgents move. A state of fear was what I never knew nightlife in my life when I was growing up. But for us, an example of peacebuilding was, and I wanted to be a physicist, but when I saw that my region is under war, what we did, we started what is called the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network. What did we do? Peacebuilding cannot be done on empty stomachs, mind you. It has to be done with a lot of love, knowing that people are nourished mentally, physically, spiritually. So what we did, we have 20,000 women have been widowed in my home state because of the war. We asked people, is there food on the table? Are the children going to school? Are you able to access health care? Are you able to litigate? All these three basic questions. I'm not an economist, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but common sense to see when there's a war-like situation, how do we respond? By three basic things. And most importantly, we also wanted people, because people need a life, a future, and a security. So what we did was we also ensured and worked a lot on livelihood. Livelihood, for example, it was women of Manipur who taught me that $120 can transform their life. If money could change lives, millionaires and billionaires' children could have done it, right? And they are not doing it. I realized in my life that the most generous people in this world are the ones who had the least enough themselves. But yet from them, it is not just that people who have money will give to them. You can learn so much from the resilience, the dignity, and the strength from the marginalized communities. So this is how we did peacebuilding. By setting up networks, ensuring that these local networks, we were able to set up 37 indigenous women groups all across the Indo-Burma border. We trained them on techniques of how to do peacebuilding, most importantly, to how to take care of themselves. Sometimes we ask questions like, what is your name? What does your name mean? What kind of association? And you could see the faces of these widowed women, these women who have lost loved ones in this conflict, their children. You could see their faces changing. Finally, in the last 7 months, Manipur went through the worst war of its kinds. This was before the Middle East crisis broke out. 2 ethnic groups, indigenous groups, were made to slaughter each other in the past 7 months. 2 ethnic groups, I will not name them because I love both these communities, but these 2 communities who have never been fought, hate was generated. They belong to 2 faith groups and they were made to kill each other. While the world's largest democracy watches the death, the destruction, 70,000 people lost their homes, more than 200 people were killed, and thousands currently displaced, living in 379 refugee and relief camps right now. Yet, there are 36 known conflicts in the world where you see in your newspapers, you see in CNN, BBC, but there are 300 other unreported, forgotten conflicts in the world. My region is one of them. And my final point is, so when this conflict erupted, this was May the 3rd, how do we do peace building? International Mother's Day came on 14th of May, and Bridges was there. And we discussed with each other and said, what do we do? We saw Ukraine happening, as Quscondy said. We saw different Burma happening. So on 14th of May, instead of giving our mothers flowers, there is one word called Ima, which is very interesting. The word Ima in my language means mother. It also means in Hebrew, mother. Can you imagine the similarity? So we imagined if mothers of Ukraine, mothers of Russia, mothers of Afghanistan, mothers of Burma, mothers of United States, mothers of Guatemala, mothers of Honduras, mothers of the world unite, the power that we can do to bring change. So we started a network of International Mothers Association to see how our motherhood, and it can include fathers too, or anyone who feel like a mother, means someone who nurtures, who cares for this earth. So this is how we have done peace building locally, nationally, and globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Bina. So you can see why one of the things I've learned from these friends is how much we have to learn from these friends and so many other local peace builders around the world. I want to pick up on the decolonizing conversation that we started to weave into this last question, and maybe starting with Vahe this time, and the work that you described on decolonizing peace building. And we talk about that, but at FCNL, we did a report somewhat related on dismantling racism and militarism in U.S. foreign policy. But what does decolonizing peace building look like, especially for advocates like us? You know, we've been advocating for more funding for peace building that would be more locally led, but what does decolonizing peace building look like, and how can we do it better as advocates? How can we be part of that transformation that you all spoke of in some way?
Definitely. I think it's a very important question. And I think right now it's for individuals that are here and that care about and passionate about this, it is, the advocacy for increasing the funding for peace building. And it's also the advocacy efforts to ensure that those resources are reaching directly to local communities, to give space and recognize the expertise that is already existing in a lot of these spaces. I'm sitting next to two incredible people who are brilliant in their own right. Yet for some odd reason, our system is set up in a way where their expertise is often overlooked and not even recognized. And that's the space that we are trying to be creating as an organization of Peace Direct, and give space. And, Bridget was a part of a lot of these meetings where we bring peace builders to Washington, D.C. and to New York for the UN and have conversations with policymakers. And those are some of my favorite meetings because I just sit there and say nothing. I am learning as much as the policymaker is. But that is the space that we need to be creating. And some of it is also in pushing the other organizations, the other civil society organizations that are based here in the United States that operate internationally, is to recognize the power that they're bringing and what they're doing. So for Peace Direct is, again, that we are following the leadership of the peacebuilding organizations we work with globally, while also recognizing that our role within the international system is to create the space for them to be speaking and to be showing sharing and sharing their brilliance and whatever they're learning and doing with the international community. It is also to convene. So we have the ability to convene. So we, more recently last week, hosted a virtual closed-door briefing with our partners from the Democratic Republic of Congo, with policymakers from the United States, the UN, the EU, and the UK. We hosted the conversation, but we weren't the ones speaking. Our partners were speaking. It is also in recognizing that expertise that is there, it is allowing people to speak in their strongest language. So why, for us in the United States, is questioning why does everything have to be done in English for the international community? You know, the USA, the largest humanitarian and development donor around the world, everything is done in English. They have, Administrator Samantha Power came up with commitments for localization and to localize how USA does its operations. Every policy paper that they've come out with, they have solicited or tried to solicit feedback from civil society organizations around the world. All of it is still in English. We are pushing it for it to be in other languages. So it's like, how do we recognize all these things? How do we push? How do we give space? How do we recognize other languages that are existing? So it's a lot of doing that. And then it's also, you know, in transforming the partnerships is, if you're in the work, is how do you build trust? How do you, you know, for Peace Direct is coming in with our partners is whatever we ask of them is what we also bring to the table to show. So if we're asking for their accounts and their finances to see how they're operating, we show ours as well. We're not hiding ours. So it's that mutual respect of giving space. Is the partnerships of a, as Bina was mentioning, of a lifestyle, for us, the partnership isn't contingent on us having a grant. All of our partners, we've had very long-standing partnerships. Some are a lot newer than the others, but we've had partners where we've partnered with them for over 15 years. Some we've had grants throughout those, sometimes we haven't, but we've stayed with our partners, we've supported them in many ways, even if it's through the advocacy efforts. If something is erupting in their country, we try to mobilize resources to them, but it's within this decolonizing work is recognizing where you are within that and how you can be supporting and giving space, whether it's giving resources or whatever it is, but it's recognizing the power that you are bringing and then sharing that space and not having to be in the lead all the time.
Great, thank you. Quscondy, do you want to jump in? And then Bina?
Yeah, I think one of the key things I could say here is, you know, just given an illustrative example of how power sometimes can change something good to nothing. You know, we went to some community area for one of our exercise when I was a student in university in Uganda, and we went to a place where there's an international organization that's been working for 9 years. For those 9 years, one of the senior staff stayed for 6 years, become part of the community. And we need to do, you know, the kind of community engagement program. So when we arrived there, she got hit by malaria. And the whole village, nobody knows how to do anything. And that's the time when I start to talk to some of the, you know, university graduate. One of them has a master's degree. Like, how long have you been here? And say, oh, I have been here for 8 years, and the other one has been here for 5 years. And you can't do anything. It's like, no, you can't do anything without. And that is where the problem lies, meaning that you everything comes back as you do peace or any development project, or this is, you guys are all bad and we are bringing something good somewhere and giving you to enjoy. And within that conversation, it becomes your thing and not their thing. And that is where the biggest problem lies with our structures. Why? Because the communities that you see in nations and countries where the conflict exists, the social structures that are built are result of survival for several years of oppressions. In continent like Africa, where I come from, the relationship between the state, the idea of the state is introduced by colonial power, meaning that the relationship between the people and the state was established as hostile relationship. Hostile relationship in form of slave hunting, slavery. So state itself has always been a mechanism of oppression. And people's preconception of somebody who is related to power is not to tell them the truth, or somehow you play around to make them happy. And, you know, when I was engaging, we went out, we were talking, and I said, I found that, you know, this development expert has a name that everyone in the village knows, called only that name. And she never heard how people call her because nobody said around her. And she lives for 6 years. So that is where the bubble of our enterprise failed to make an impact. And the question of accountability, as Vahe says, is yes, we do our development in, you know, projects, project idea itself that is made here, you have objective outcomes. The same idea that made atomic bomb in Manhattan, that is where project idea came from. And that is why peace building itself was a military work until 1940s or 50s. That's where normal person can be a peace builder. But before that, that was a military work. So I think within that, all of this bubble, that's where there is the need to stop, think, reflect. Is there something wrong? There is something wrong, very deep, very structural. And unless we reform the way we do things, there will be more easy for a man to come and mobilize 1,000 people to go to war and die. Mm-hmm. And one peace builder can fail to mobilize 10 people to prevent it. Mm-hmm. If there is nothing wrong in our narrative, war wouldn't be that much appealing. Mm-hmm. And I think we really need to and this is really a moral, genuine question that needs not to ask us as individuals, but also as individual citizens who are part of all of this industry, because it is our tax money, to really ask difficult question, what the hell is happening here? And it is your right to ask. And I think it's time to reframe something. This is something that is deeply wrong. Mm. And that's where the power relationship comes in, where that is like, okay, it is becoming your thing, and you just keep it because it looks good. I think that's where the biggest moral question comes in. The second thing, what I really want to say with the new trend of the violence that related to decolonizations, if you see the conflict right now that are happening at the local level, as Bina said about Manipur, that somebody else ignited, because the local systems are too weak. Those communities sitting in areas where there is a lot of resources. If you see Darfur, if you see Congo, if you see Central Africa, you talk about gold, everything that you can easily steal and take it in a private jet directly to Greek and make billions of dollars. And it is very easy for any external actors to be able to find, the cracks and make violence, because we don't have existence at the peaceful peace building structure. So within those bubbles, I think there is also this international aspect where we have large actors. For Africa, for instance, Wagner now is the biggest enterprise. The guns are just phone call away. The area where, an AK-45 is cheaper than improved seed of a kilo of improved seed of maize, it is very difficult for people to choose peace when there is an easy way to be someone. everyone want to be beyond eat and drink, want to be some cows where they are beyond that. And that gives them that opportunity. So I think we really need to think to rethink the way we do. And I feel like this gathering and people like you are the people who can make a call of conscience and make this part of your course. As you ask for action, you also ask on how. And always demand for better practice. Over.
Thank you so much. And Bina, do you want to round us out? And then I want to open up for some questions from the group.
Yes. Are you still hanging on? Yes? Okay. All right. Thank you so much once again, and to my fellow panelists too. Yes. So first, the question was what does decolonizing aid means to me? A really big word, really big word. We have seen 500 years of colonization, right? It's going to take 500 years of changing it. Mm-hmm. So yes, we are in, again, whatever has happened has happened. We cannot change it. But what we can do is to change the next 500 years. Can't we change that? And I know the people in this room can make that change happen. I know this. Because Quakers are phenomenal. You are known for your peace work. And you're known to seek accountability from policymakers. And we are with you in this journey together. Okay. So decolonizing aid, this is what my data says. Of the 100% humanitarian aid which goes out to the world, do you know how much percentage reaches the survivors? 100% aid that whether any agency gives to the world, how much of that reaches the people for which it is meant to be, which are survivors, war victims. Anyone guess a 10? Another one? 5, 10? One last guess, please. No? 1%. Who said 1%? Okay, you are quite to the spot. It's 2%. Only 2%. So if you think you're giving you $100 for humanitarian aid, where does it go? Flight fares, hotel rooms. We're in a hotel. Okay. It goes to consultancy fees. 2%. I asked a Cambodian mine victim, because the Cambodian mine victim, the landmine campaign won the Nobel Peace Prize for its work. So I asked the Cambodian mine victims, did that Nobel Prize help you in your life? And this is how he answered. He said, Bina, when the bird carries the food and flies, the crumbs fall on the ground, right? The crumbs are what we get. Please, this we have to change. We have to take care of ourselves. We also ensure that others are taken equally. I have been in organizations where there's one headquartered in New York, and then they will give us $500 to do campaigns. In India, for whole India of 1.7 billion people, $500 to do a campaign. And then in the report, they will say we work in 70 countries. Please don't do that. You cannot do that. So I'm talking about peace world again. Very little support we have. I love the peace world. I know whatever little money we have is so little. So we have to first of all seek accountability from our lawmakers that they invest more. Our children and grandchildren need the future that we have to leave behind for them, where they can have faith in their governments and faith in humanity once again. We cannot afford Otherwise, the younger generation are asking questions. They are not believing us anymore. Because what we teach them, the leaders are not following it. So what kind of future are we going to, and the young ones are really smart these days. 10-year-old, 15-year-old, they have questions. So we have to be truthful to who we are, and most importantly, our leaders. Number 2. So remember that 2%, okay? Number another shocking data I'm going to give you. If you have to decolonize aid, you have to de-link aid with arms deals. Yes, please. Because you know what? For every $1 of aid given by a developing world by a developed world to a developing world, they make us buy $10 worth of weapons. For every $1. So I have seen this with my own eyes. I will not name countries. They will come and they will say, we're investing in education in X country, in a developing poor country. They will only show you visiting schools and nice things. In the end, they have signed nuclear deals, arms deals. Please do not cheat humanity, because you are robbing humanity by doing this kind of things. So decolonizing aid is also, for me, not about money. It's about being true to yourself as a nation. Because if you want to be a powerful nation, it doesn't have to come with the barrel of a gun. And if you think weapons will make nations stronger, try teaching your niece, your nephew, your grandchild how to behave at gunpoint. If it works, then try to spread power around the world with your guns. It doesn't work, and it will not work. So decolonizing aid, de-linked. Another shocking thing which I'm going to share. Now, of all the aid that I was taking, which is given to the world, how many of them goes? 88% of the humanitarian aid in the world goes to, 88% of the aid goes to 13 non-governmental organizations in the global north. So many organizations will be based in London, New York, Geneva. So again, we need them. We are not saying we do not need them. But we have to be consciously work to ensure that there is accountability. So if you sign an MOU with a big non-governmental organization, let them demonstrate that they are working with 12 other non-governmental organizations of the marginalized communities in anywhere in the world. Let them prove and when you sign an MOU. If you do not put that rider, then you will not be able to get accounted for the resource that you have spent. I think the last point, for me, again, 88% of the world's, more than 80% of the world's conflicts happen in biodiversity hotspots. Remember this when you go home. So decolonizing aid is not just about rights, but it's also about living in tune with nature. For example, do you know in New Zealand, they declared a river as a legal entity? Where we would be without our rivers, our lakes, our trees. During the pandemic, we hugged trees. The joy when you feel when you see a flower blooming, to take your child for a walk along the river. These things we need. So again, more than 80% of the world's conflicts are now happening in these spaces because of exploitation of our natural resource. So if we have to decolonize aid, we have to empower Black, Brown, Indigenous communities who live in these areas and empower them. Please empower them to do their work. If we do not include them, we will not be able to decolonize aid or anything else. So this is what I would share, that the process of decolonization is not about, it's about, as I mentioned, it's about being true to who we are and the human values that we adhere to, ensuring rule of law, that we walk the talk. We walk the talk, and doing this together and without greed and with humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bina. Thank you all so much. You've given us so much rich wisdom to absorb. I want to take just a couple minutes in case there are maybe one question on Zoom and one question in the room, given our time. I want to give that opportunity. So it looks like we're offering friends on Zoom to raise your electronic hand or put it in the chat maybe. Anyone in the room have a question? Or did you see some? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Bill Cousins from Philadelphia, and looking to the future, one of my biggest concerns is climate change, and as our last speaker just said, the loss of biodiversity. And all of the forecasts I see are saying that as a result of climate change, we're going to have much more displacement of human populations and much more potential for violence. And I'd be interested in our panelists' thoughts on, in addition to stopping use of fossil fuels, how we can address that displacement that's going to come as a result of further climate change. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And there's one question online we'll take as well, and then we'll turn to the panel, and we're going to answer these simple questions in like 2 minutes, okay? So I think I saw a hand online. Can you unmute? She's trying to unmute.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't see your name, but it's you. You won the electronic hand prize. Yes.
So much. My head is exploding. And actually, I think the point the gentleman just made is probably one of the most important points we can talk about. We have got to couple these conversations with discussions about environmental degradation, if you want to have a more general climate change, loss of biodiversity, et cetera. It cannot be separated. And that was an amazing statistic you talked about 80% of conflicts being in biodiversity hot zones. Oh my gosh. I did have a question just because I was blown away, and I put it in the chat. So I thought you guys were going to read questions from the chat, but I can read my question from the chat, which is, are you saying that when I give money to groups like Save the Children or Physicians Without Borders, only 2% of the funds actually help people?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's what you're saying.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
That's what.
Thank you. And different organizations probably have different levels of reaching local people, but yeah, it's a shocking statistic. So could we just wrap up maybe with the big question then on climate change and environment and peace building? And Quscondy looks ready to jump in.
Yeah, maybe so one key common sense about the recent or the modern conflict is always the issue that is very common and is very ignored, and which is the climate change. Most of this conflict that start at local level or the global level are also a result of the resource degradation, a conflict around limited resources, drought and flood-induced migration. And these are very much integral part, not just the biodiversity, but also the environment has a direct impact on the people's livelihood. And there is the fear of the environmental problem is the fear of survival. This is something that triggered in our subconscious of a large, big fear that everyone has. And this is very much touched people who live in an area where, for instance, the Saheli region, where desert sometimes is, place where always was raining, and it has 5 years no rainfall. And there is an accumulated and visible fear of survival. And always when a human turn it from their normal existence to a survival mode, it's always turned more aggressive and more easy to be violent, and more easy to take things in the hand because it triggers the trauma that has already been existing and evolving for several years. And I think the question of climate is one of the uniting thing, that it doesn't affect only people in the global south, but it affects everyone everywhere. However, the effect of the climate is also structural, because people here may have more insurance, they have more social security networks. People in some global south, they don't have, while the impact of the global warming and the climate that they are paying the price of is actually made here. Those people go to school by horses, donkeys. They don't consume fuels. But it is one person to grow one child here until 17 years old to go to college. You consume 150 times more than everyone there use for their lifetimes. And there is a lot of differences. And that's why, there's always also differential effect of the climate impact, how people pay the price of the climate impact. And that's something that really need a collective action as well. And it's something that actually unite everyone. And I think it can be a peace-building message and platform around it.
Thank you. Other final comments?
Yes, yeah, I'll just jump in. Again, what our earlier someone said from the Zoom room. Yes, absolutely. 80% of the world's conflicts happen in biodiversity hotspots. And you know who live there? Indigenous populations live there. So for addressing climate change and these issues, we will have to make indigenous people. And you know how many indigenous people live in this world? 500 million indigenous people live in 90 countries and territories. Their exclusion in the decision-making on climate justice has to be addressed very strongly. Again, another data which I just checked. There are $270 million have been earmarked for looking at climate change, 270 million. Out of that, only 17% are, for indigenous groups, 17%. So again, just to share, when you are decolonizing the whole question of changing the transformation around, you see where we are making, that's why somebody was shocked. So all the money that you're going for these big organizations, question them. You do it year by year because it has become a habit. It is time to decolonize that. And that's exactly the organization which Bridget headed, Peace Direct. For me, when I first met Peace Direct in my life, I was shocked that an organization actually can work directly with peace builders on the ground, like myself. This is a transformation. And this has to be magnified. So please rethink what you had been investing in the last 50 years to turn it around and start investing in local communities who can not only bring peace on the ground, but help us live in communion with nature. They are the stakeholders. They know the pathways. I come from an indigenous community where before you cut a tree, you're actually worshiping the tree, for asking forgiveness. Trees for indigenous communities are considered as divine things and not just trees. So if we do not understand our connection with the earth, that we are in as we worship the gods we believe in. If we do not do that, then we will be atomized people, not connecting with each other. And we have to make that turnaround to be able to find the peace that each and every one, 7 billion people in this world deserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last words, Vahe. And
Yes. I wanted to touch on exactly a little bit of what Bina was saying as far as with Peace Direct. I mean, all the organizations operate a little differently. I think for us, we value in trying to take care of our staff so that we can take care of our peace builders and let them do the work. It is an and question. It is not a one or the other. It is trying to find the both to make sure that everyone is being able to be resourced enough to do the work. And the part of the decolonizing efforts as well is to recognize that support system that we all need, that bit of rest and everything else of life that comes with the job, right? And then at the same time, it is, again, being there and giving ourselves and giving the space that is needed for the peace builders that we work with. As Bina was mentioning, as far as our work is always led by our partners. We are not the experts, and we pride ourselves in saying that we are not the experts, our partners are the experts. On the displacement from climate change, we led a report called Migration and Peacebuilding, kind of looking at the impacts of displacement and refugees on peacebuilding. And what we found is that too often that these two are very siloed and do not come together to do the work. And that's something that we must be bridging as well, because it is correctly said that climate is going to impact a lot of displacement, which will then spur potential more violence. And that's where the peacebuilding work needs to also be invested in to prevent the potential for violence that could happen. But I also want to make light of being careful with the renewable energy and everything as far as how we're resourcing and doing all these things within the decolonizing frame of, having electric vehicles and all the resources it takes for that. Where are those, minerals coming from? Where is all this? How is it being mined? How is it doing all these things? It's not just that we have the electrical vehicle. Where is that all coming from? Is it equitably sourced? Are we doing it in a just way, in an equitable way? So it's also reading into that and not just having the Tesla or whatever other electric vehicle brand that exists. But
it's ongoing work. It's ongoing work. A commitment of a lifetime is peace building. I want to thank you all for your commitment. Before we wrap up, I see our tech host has her electronic hand up, and I just want to make sure if, Rebecca, you need to tell us something, you can do that.
That's okay. We had one other question in the chat from someone who was not able to unmute that I was going to squeeze in there, but I don't think we have time, so no problem.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, let's keep that, keep the question, and we can get it to our speakers and get a response somehow too. And we do have announcements before we all go to listen to music by a Ukrainian band that is probably waiting for us. Is that right? And you are all welcome to join us for that. But before we do announcements, please give our speakers a round of applause and gratitude. And announcements.
All righty, everyone. Can we give one more round of applause to our esteemed guests? It has been a long and fantastic day of action and learning, and we have just a few announcements for you all before we move on to our very special performance after this session. So our announcements include: tomorrow, we will have a closing plenary session at 12 p.m. presented by the fantastic Deputy Director of Strategic Advocacy, Sarah Freeman-Wolpert, and our fantastic Legislative Director of Middle East Policy, Hassan El-Tayab. And during this closing plenary session, which I really encourage folks to make time for, we'll be highlighting the lobby visits that you all have done over the past few days, and we'll also be discussing how we can move this work forward, supporting peace building, as well as the ongoing ask for a ceasefire in Gaza. Excitingly, during that closing plenary session, we will also be discussing the advocacy team's topic for 2024. So if you're an advocacy team's participant, this is one you can't miss. We also have an announcement from folks in the audience. For anyone who's involved in state-level advocacy, there will be an informal gathering on Friday at breakfast at the front of the plenary room, that's in here, by the right-hand screen when you look at the stage. So you're right, not mine. That's it. This gathering is going to be convened by Susan Cousins for the Quaker State Level Legislative Advocacy Network. So maybe Susan, can you wave your hand if you're in the room? There's Susan. You can see Susan at any time to talk about your state level advocacy and of course, meet on Friday, tomorrow at breakfast. So I'm going to turn it now to our process observer, Lizzie, to come to the stage and share about what they observed during our gathering today. And after our process observer shares these observations, I'll turn it to Susan to share more information about finding our way to the concert. Lizzie?
Thank you, friends. This was a rich presentation on top of a rich day of lobbying and advocacy. I felt in the room a tremendous amount of gratitude, not only for our fabulous speakers and the work that you all are doing, so thank you again, but also for the work of FCNL, who has made this weekend possible, and for our advocacy today. And I hope friends are feeling that sense of that theme that our theme of annual meeting, that was resonating for me as part of observing our process for tonight. Just a reminder that we are asking friends if you're able to wear a mask while in the plenary sessions and other sessions as a reminder of our community agreements to each other. So that was the main observation that I noticed.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. We also happen to have one surprise announcement. Well, not really a surprise. Tomorrow morning, just a reminder, we've been used to having breakfast in this room. Breakfast will not be served in this room, as we'll be having unprogrammed worship in here. Breakfast will be served on the other side, essentially, of this level. There have been rooms basically on the other side of the stairwell when you come down. Those will be open, and that's where breakfast will be served. So just a reminder there. Well, oh yes, I see a hand.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say, for process facilitators and observers.
Oh, microphone, yes, please. We want to make sure that everyone can hear.
Just wanted to name that for process facilitators and observers, there will be an optional debrief of today at Hermitage right across the hall from here at 9:20. So people can go to the concert and then hop over here for the debrief of the day. And affinity group leaders are also welcome to join that if they are so led.
Thank you for that reminder, Lauren. Well, now on to the piece of exciting news. We have with us some special guests tonight. Gerden, a Ukrainian music ensemble whose music shares a passion for traditional sounds and building cultural bridges. For those of you who were able to attend the session this afternoon on calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, the healing and joyful nature of music was a strong theme in that session. So we're really excited to be bringing this group to you all tonight. If you would like to attend the performance, that'll be happening upstairs in the atrium ballroom. So if you go up not one, but two levels in the elevator, it'll be on that floor. Great, thank you all so much for joining us. And see you upstairs.